She walked into my hardware store like she was measuring it for a coffin. My daughter-in-law had already done the math in her head before she even said hello. She figured she was dealing with some tired old shopkeeper who could barely count his own inventory. What she did not realize was that I had been watching people like her walk through that door for 38 years, and I could smell trouble the way you smell rain before the first drop falls. The day my son Kevin slipped that ring on Brittany's finger, I made a choice. I would not say a single word about what I actually owned. Not the store, not the building, not the 6 rental units on Maple Street, not the waterfront lot I bought for pennies back in 1994. Not the investment accounts my wife Patricia and I had been quietly feeding for 4 decades. I stood there in my suit, the one Patricia picked out for me before she got sick, and I clapped and smiled and kept my mouth shut. Best decision I ever made. My name is George. I am 66 years old. I have owned and operated Caldwell's Hardware on Main Street in Beaufort, South Carolina, since I was 28 years old. The store was started in 1951 by my wife's grandfather, a man named Edwin Caldwell, who came back from Korea and decided he never wanted to work for anyone else again. Edwin built the store with his own hands, literally, cut the timber himself from a lot he owned outside of town, laid every beam, every floorboard. Patricia grew up sweeping those floors. She took over from her father in 1988. When I married her that same year, she put me to work, stocking shelves and running the register. I did not mind. I loved that woman. I loved that store. I loved the way she could talk a contractor out of buying cheap materials and into buying the right ones. She had a gift. Patricia passed away 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer. She fought it for 14 months, which was 11 months longer than the doctors expected. That was Patricia. She never did anything on anyone else's schedule. Before she died, she grabbed my hand one morning. The hospice nurse had just left the room. Patricia looked at me with those sharp brown eyes. Even then, even at the end, sharp as a box cutter. She said, "George, promise me something." I said, "Anything." She said, "That store is not just wood and nails. It is my grandfather's hands. It is my father's life. It is our life. Do not let anyone take it. Not a developer, not a bank, not a sweet-talking stranger with a business plan. Nobody," I promised her. I did not know that the sweet-talking stranger she was warning me about would be sitting at my Thanksgiving table 2 years later. Kevin met Brittany at a gym in Charleston. She was a real estate agent, had her face on bus stop benches. You know the type. Big smile, white teeth, hair that looked expensive. Kevin was 36. He had worked at the store with me since he was a teenager, but he had moved to Charleston 5 years earlier to take a job with a marine supply company. He was not a go-getter. He was a good kid, kind, a little soft, the type who would rather avoid a fight than win one. Patricia always worried about that. She used to say, "Kevin is going to fall in love with whoever falls in love with him first. We better hope she is a good one." Brittany was not a good one. They dated for 7 months. Kevin brought her to Beaufort on a Sunday in April. She drove a white SUV with tinted windows and personalized plates that said Britt Re, real estate. I grilled steaks in the backyard. Brittany sat across from me and smiled a lot. She asked about the store. She asked about the neighborhood. She asked how long Main Street properties had been in the family. She used the word portfolio twice during a conversation about potato salad. I told her the store did all right. I told her Beaufort was a quiet town. I told her the building had been around a long time. I did not tell her that Caldwell's Hardware sat on a double lot in the most desirable commercial block in Beaufort's historic district. I did not tell her that the building alone, not the business, just the building and the land, had been appraised at $2.8 million the year before by a firm in Savannah. I did not mention that the store cleared just over $340,000 a year in net profit, or that the rental properties Patricia and I had acquired over the years brought in another $11,000 a month. I did not say anything about the brokerage account, the municipal bonds, or the 2 life insurance payouts from Patricia's policies that were sitting in a trust earning interest. Brittany looked at my store and saw a dusty old hardware shop run by a man in a flannel shirt. She had no idea she was looking at an estate worth north of $6 million. That was fine with me. Let her look. The wedding was in September. They held it at a venue outside Charleston, one of those plantation-style places with Spanish moss and string lights. Brittany's parents paid for most of it. Her father was a retired car dealer from Myrtle Beach. Nice enough, man. Shook my hand hard. Told me Kevin was a fine young man with a solid head on his shoulders. At the reception, Brittany found me standing by the bar. She had a glass of champagne in one hand and her phone in the other. She leaned in close. She said, "Dad, can I call you that now? I just want you to know Kevin and I are so grateful for everything you have done. And I want you to know that we are here for you. Running that store by yourself since Patricia passed. That must be so hard. You do not have to do it alone anymore." I looked at her. I said, "I appreciate that, but I have good help at the store. Jimmy has been with me 22 years. We manage." She tilted her head. She said, "Of course, but have you thought about the future? Long term? That building must need a lot of upkeep. And the market in Beaufort is really heating up. Waterfront property, historic district. I mean, do you even know what your block is worth right now?" I took a sip of my bourbon. I said, "I have not given it much thought." She smiled. She said, "Well, maybe you should. That is all I am saying." No pressure. There was pressure. I could feel it in the way her fingers tightened around her glass. She had already done the research. She just needed me to catch up. 4 weeks after the wedding, Kevin drove down to Beaufort. He came into the store on a Wednesday afternoon. Slow day. He sat on the stool by the register. Same stool he used to sit on doing homework when he was in middle school. He said, "Dad, Brittany and I have been talking. I was pricing a shipment of deck screws." I did not look up. He said, "She thinks we should sell the store." I set down my pricing gun. He said, "Not to a stranger. To us. We would keep the name. Keep it in the family. Brittany knows the real estate market here. She could handle the commercial side. Maybe convert part of the building into retail space. Lease it out. The location is incredible, Dad. You are sitting on a gold mine." I looked at my son. I said, "Kevin, your great-grandfather built this store with lumber he cut himself. Your grandmother ran it for 30 years. Your mother ran it until the day she could not stand up anymore. And you want to lease it out?" He shifted on the stool. He said, "Times change, Dad. A hardware store on Main Street is not what it used to be. Brittany says the smart move is to monetize the real estate." Monetize. That word came out of his mouth like he had rehearsed it in the car. I said, "The store is not for sale." He stood up. He said, "Just think about it." He left. Did not buy anything. Did not even walk through the aisles the way he used to, running his hand along the shelves like he was saying hello to an old friend. That night I locked up the store and sat in the back office. Patricia's desk was still there. Her reading glasses were still in the top drawer. I opened the drawer and held them. They were small in my hands. I thought about what Kevin had said. I thought about what Brittany had said at the wedding, and I decided to do what I do best. Wait, watch, and let people show me who they really are. Over the next 3 months, Brittany started showing up in Beaufort more often. She would come by on Saturdays. She would walk through the store with her phone out, taking pictures she thought I did not notice. She started asking to see the books. She said she wanted to help me get organized. She said small businesses needed proper accounting. I let her see the operating account, the one that showed a modest profit, the one that made Caldwell's hardware look like what she already believed it was, a tired little shop barely getting by. I did not show her the trust. I did not show her the investment accounts. I did not show her the property tax records for the 6 rental units or the waterfront lot. Those records were in a safe deposit box at a bank in Savannah, along with the original deed Edwin Caldwell signed in 1951. Brittany looked at my numbers and saw a business making maybe $80,000 a year. She saw an old man treading water. She started talking to Kevin about the real play. The land. I know this because Kevin is not a good liar. He started asking me questions about the building. How old was the roof? Was the foundation solid? Had I ever gotten an environmental assessment? These were not Kevin questions. These were real estate agent questions. In November, they came to my house together. Brittany had a leather folder. Kevin looked like he had not slept. Brittany said, "George, we need to have a difficult conversation." She opened the folder. Inside were printouts of the store's bank statements, the ones I had given her access to. She had highlighted certain entries in yellow. She said, "I have been going through your financials, and I am concerned. There are duplicate orders here. Payments to vendors that do not match invoices. You deposited the same check twice in August." I looked at the papers. Every single error she found was one I had planted. I had been feeding her false trails for weeks. Little mistakes designed to look like confusion. I wanted to see where she would take them. Now I knew. Brittany leaned forward. She said, "George, I say this with love. I think you might be struggling cognitively. It is nothing to be ashamed of. It happens. But if this continues, you could lose the business entirely. Bad orders, missed payments, liability issues. What if someone gets hurt because you sold the wrong grade of lumber?" I looked at Kevin. He was staring at his shoes. I said, "What do you suggest?" Kevin cleared his throat. He said, "Maybe it is time to step back, Dad. Let Brittany and me handle things. She knows business. She knows the Beaufort market. We could take over operations, keep you involved in an advisory role." An advisory role. In my own store, Brittany smiled. She said, "We just want to protect you." I said I would think about it. They left. Brittany hugged me at the door. She whispered, "We are going to take such good care of everything, Dad." I closed the door. Then I called my attorney. His name is Vernon Drake. He had been Patricia's lawyer for 25 years. He drew up our trust, our wills, our property agreements. He knew every dollar, every deed, every clause. I said, "Vernon, I need you to check everything. Make sure it is all locked tight." Vernon said, "George, it is ironclad. Everything is in the living trust. You are the sole trustee. Kevin is not mentioned in any capacity until you amend the documents. Brittany has no legal standing whatsoever." I said, "Good. Keep it that way." 2 months went by. Brittany escalated. She started calling me 3 times a week. The store's insurance was outdated. The electrical wiring was a fire hazard. Had I renewed the business license? Did I know about the new county zoning regulations? She always framed it as concern, always with that smile I could hear through the phone. I played along. I acted forgetful. I asked her to repeat things. I pretended I could not find documents she had mentioned the week before. I let her believe she was dealing with a man whose mind was slipping. In January, Brittany made her move. She showed up at my front door on a Saturday morning with a woman carrying a briefcase. Brittany said, "Dad, this is Angela. She is a notary public. I have some paperwork that needs your signature." I let them in. I made coffee. I moved a little slower than usual, like my knee was acting up. Brittany spread documents across my kitchen table. She said, "These are standard power of attorney forms, nothing complicated. They just allow Kevin and me to help manage your financial affairs if something happens to you. Think of it as insurance." I picked up the documents. The power of attorney was not limited. It was not specific. It was a general grant of authority. If I signed it, Brittany and Kevin could access my accounts, sell my property, enter contracts in my name, and make every financial decision on my behalf. Angela, the notary, sat quietly, stamp at the ready. I read every page. Slowly, Brittany said, "You do not need to read the whole thing." I said, "Patricia always said the same thing about legal documents." Brittany's smile tightened. "What is that?" She said, "Never sign a paper you would not want read aloud in front of a judge." I set the documents down. I said, "I think I will have Vernon take a look at these first." The change in Brittany's face was instant. The warmth drained out of it like water out of a cracked bucket. She said, "George, that is not necessary. This is straightforward. Why would you need a lawyer for something this simple?" I said, "If it is simple, then Vernon will have it back to you by Tuesday." Brittany snatched the papers off the table. She said, "Fine." She left with Angela. No goodbye. No hug this time. That night, Kevin called. He said Brittany was upset. He said I had embarrassed her. He said I was being paranoid. I said, wanting my own lawyer to review a power of attorney document is not paranoid, Kevin. It is common sense. He got quiet. Then he said, Brittany thinks maybe you should not be living alone. She found a senior community in Hilton Head. It is nice. They have a pool and activities. My hand tightened on the phone. I said, I am 66 years old. I bench press 185 pounds. I run a profitable business 6 days a week. And you want to put me in a retirement village with bingo night. Kevin said, it is just an option. I said, here is another option. Tell your wife to stop. I hung up. For 2 weeks. Silence. Then, on a cold Thursday morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it. Brittany was standing on my porch with 2 people I had never seen. A man and a woman, both in business casual. The man had a county ID badge clipped to his jacket. Brittany said, George, these people are from Adult Protective Services. Someone filed a report expressing concern about your well-being. I looked at the man. He said, Mr. Caldwell, we received a report suggesting possible self-neglect. Do you mind if we come in and just have a conversation? I held the door open. I said, please. They walked through my house. They checked the kitchen. They opened the refrigerator, which was fully stocked because I am a man who likes to cook. They looked at the bathrooms, the bedroom, the living room. They asked me what day it was. They asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. They asked me to remember 3 words and repeat them 5 minutes later. Apple, bicycle, sunset. I said them back perfectly. The woman made notes. The man looked around one more time. Then he turned to me and said, Mr. Caldwell, your home is clean and well-maintained. You are oriented and articulate. I see no evidence of self-neglect or cognitive impairment. He looked at Brittany. He said, I am not sure what prompted this report, but there does not appear to be a basis for concern. Brittany's face turned red. She said, but the business, the financial mistakes, he is losing track of things. The man said, financial disputes are a civil matter. They are outside our scope. They left. Brittany stood in my living room. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were hard. She said, you think you have won something. I said, I do not think this is a game, Brittany. But if it were, you would be losing. She walked out, slammed the door so hard the picture of Patricia on the hallway wall tilted sideways. I straightened it. I touched the glass over her face. I said, almost time, sweetheart. 2 weeks later, I called Kevin. I said I had been doing some thinking. I said maybe they were right. Maybe it was time to talk about the future. I invited them to dinner at the store. Saturday night. Just the 3 of us. I said I would cook Patricia's shrimp and grits, the dish that put Caldwell's on the map back when Edwin used to serve it out the back door on Saturdays. They showed up at 6. Brittany was wearing heels. She looked like she was walking into a closing. Kevin looked hopeful for the first time in months. I seated them at the old workbench in the back office, the same one where Patricia used to spread out the books every Sunday. I served the shrimp and grits on the good plates. I poured sweet tea. Brittany raised her glass. She said, to family. I did not drink. I said, before we toast, there are some things I need to say. They both looked at me. I reached into the drawer of Patricia's desk and pulled out a folder. Not thin, thick. I said, Brittany, over the past few months, you have looked at this store's finances and found some troubling things. Duplicate orders, missing deposits, sloppy bookkeeping. She started to nod. I said, every single one of those errors was put there by me. On purpose. Her nod stopped. I said, I wanted to see what you would do with them. Whether you would help me fix them, like someone who actually cared, or whether you would use them as leverage to take control. You chose leverage. I opened the folder. I said, but there are some things you never saw. Things I made sure you would never see. I spread the documents on the workbench. Trust papers, property deeds, bank statements, investment account summaries, appraisal reports. I said, Patricia and I did not just own this store. We own this building, free and clear. We own 6 rental units on Maple Street. We own a waterfront parcel on Bay Street that we bought in 1994 for $40,000 that is now worth $1.4 million. We have investment accounts, municipal bonds, 2 life insurance payouts in trust. I pointed to the bottom line on the summary sheet Vernon had prepared. I said, total estimated value of the Caldwell estate, $6.2 million, held in a living trust. I am the sole trustee. Kevin is not named. You are not named. Nobody is named. Kevin's face went white. Brittany stared at the numbers. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I said, here is what is going to happen. You are going to stop calling Adult Protective Services. You are going to stop bringing notaries to my house. You are going to stop telling my son that his father is losing his mind. Brittany found her voice. She said, you cannot prove I did any of that. I reached into my shirt pocket and took out my phone. I set it on the table. I said, South Carolina is a one-party consent state. That means every conversation I have been part of, I can legally record. And I have recorded all of them. Every phone call where you coached Kevin on what to say. Every visit where you pushed for power of attorney. The conversation with Angela, the notary, where you told her to move quickly before I read the documents. The phone call where you discussed the APS report with Kevin the night before you filed it. I looked at her. I said, I have 14 recordings. My attorney has copies of all of them. Brittany's face lost all color. She looked like someone had pulled the plug on whatever machine was running behind her eyes. Kevin put his head in his hands. He said, Dad, I did not know she was going to call Protective Services. She told me it was just a checkup. I said, you knew enough, Kevin. You knew what she wanted. You went along with it because you thought there would be a payday at the end. Kevin did not argue. He could not. I stood up. I picked up the folder. I said, Patricia and I built this life together over 38 years. We worked 6 days a week. We skipped vacations. We drove used cars. We reinvested every spare dollar back into this store and this town. She made me promise, on her deathbed, that I would protect what we built. My voice cracked. I did not try to stop it. I said, this was supposed to be your inheritance, Kevin. Yours and your children's. A legacy. Something that would outlast all of us. I looked at my son. He was crying. I said, but a promise is a promise, and I will not let anyone take this from our family. Not even family. I pulled a single sheet of paper from the folder. I set it on the table. I said, I have amended my will. If I die tomorrow, everything, the store, the properties, the accounts, all of it, goes to the Caldwell Heritage Foundation. Vernon helped me set it up. It is a non-profit that will preserve this building and this block as a historic site. Patricia's grandfather's name will be on a plaque out front forever. Brittany jumped to her feet. She said, you are bluffing. I said, call Vernon on Monday. He will confirm every word. I pulled an envelope from the folder. I placed it on the table in front of Kevin. I said, there is a check in there for $10,000. Consider it a belated wedding gift. It is the last dollar you will see from me until I decide otherwise. Kevin stood up. He said, Dad, please, can we talk about this? I said, we have been talking for months. The only difference is now you are hearing me. I walked to the back door of the store. I opened it. The night air was cool, carrying the salt smell of the Beaufort River 2 blocks away. I said, lock the front door when you leave. Brittany grabbed Kevin's arm. She hissed something I could not hear. Kevin did not move. Brittany turned to me. She said, this is not over. I will get a lawyer. I will contest everything. I said, go ahead. Vernon has 14 recordings and 6 months of documentation. He says we have grounds for a restraining order if you come near this store or my home again. He also says that filing a false report with Adult Protective Services is a misdemeanor in South Carolina. Do you want me to keep going? Brittany's face twisted. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. She picked up her purse and walked out without another word. Kevin stood there, just him and me and the ghosts of 3 generations. He said, "Dad, I am so sorry." I said, "I know you are." He said, "I love you." I said, "I love you too. But love does not fix what you broke. You are going to have to earn it back." He nodded. He walked out. I heard his car start. I heard Brittany's voice, loud, through the closed windows. Then the car pulled away. I locked the back door. I walked through the store. I ran my hand along the shelves the way Kevin used to when he was a boy. I touched the original countertop that Edwin Caldwell built in 1951. The wood was smooth as glass, from 75 years of hands. I sat down in Patricia's chair in the back office. Her reading glasses were still in the top drawer. I opened it. I held them. I whispered, "I kept my promise, Patricia. The store is safe. Your grandfather's store is safe." I sat there for a long time. That was 7 months ago. Brittany never hired a lawyer. Vernon sent her a letter detailing everything I had. The recordings, the APS report timeline, the notary incident. He suggested that any legal action on her part would be met with counterclaims and public disclosure. She backed down. Kevin called me about 6 weeks later. His voice was different, smaller. He said he was sorry. He said Brittany had manipulated him. He said he should have seen it sooner. I told him I believed him. I told him he was my son and that would never change. But I also told him that trust is like that old countertop. It takes decades to get smooth, and one bad hit to crack it. He understood. He started coming back to Beaufort on weekends. First, he would just sit at the register and watch. Then he started helping customers. Then he started staying to close up. One Saturday, I walked into the store and found him repainting the trim around the front window. He had matched the original color exactly. Hunter green. Same shade Edwin used. I stood there watching him for a moment before he noticed me. He looked up and said, "Mom always said this green was the only green." I nodded. I said, "She was right. Brittany filed for divorce 3 months ago. Turns out, she was not interested in being married to a man who was not about to inherit millions. She had already moved on to a dentist in Mount Pleasant." Kevin was hurt, but I think some part of him was relieved. Like setting down a weight he did not realize he had been carrying. The other night, Kevin was sweeping the store after closing. He stopped and leaned on the broom and looked around. He said, "Dad, I do not know if you will ever forgive me for what happened, but I want you to know that I get it now. I get what this place means. It is not about the money. It never was." I was wiping down the counter. I said, "Your mother used to say that this store was never about selling hardware. It was about being the place where people came when something needed fixing. And she did not just mean their houses." Kevin smiled. First real smile I had seen from him in over a year. He said, "I want to be part of that, Dad. For real this time." I looked at my son. I said, "Then show up tomorrow. We open at 7. He said, "Yes, sir. I have not changed my will yet. The Caldwell Heritage Foundation is still the beneficiary. But I am watching. I am watching Kevin sand and prime and stock shelves and sweep floors and talk to customers with that same patient voice Patricia used to have. I am watching him become the man I raised him to be." Vernon asked me last week if I wanted to update the trust. I told him not yet. I told him I was still deciding. He said, "George, the kid is trying." I said, "I know he is. And Patricia would want me to give him a chance. But she would also want me to be sure." Vernon said, "How will you know?" I thought about it. I said, "I will know when he stops treating this store like something he has to earn and starts treating it like something he belongs to." Vernon laughed. He said, "That sounds like something Patricia would say." It was. Last Sunday, after closing, I was sitting in the back office. Kevin had already gone home. I opened the drawer and took out Patricia's reading glasses. I held them in my hands. Then I noticed something. On the workbench, Kevin had left a note. It said, "Dad, the trim out front needs another coat. I will come early Tuesday before we open. Also, Mrs. Henderson called about her screen door again. I told her we would take care of it. See you tomorrow. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in the drawer next to Patricia's glasses. I turned off the lights. I locked the front door. I stepped outside onto Main Street. Beaufort was quiet. The live oaks along the sidewalk threw long shadows under the streetlights. Somewhere down toward the water, a boat horn sounded. I looked up at the building. Edwin Caldwell's building. Patricia's building. My building. The hunter green trim Kevin had painted was clean and bright against the old brick. I stood there for a while. Then I walked to my truck, the same truck I have driven for 12 years, parked in the same spot behind the store where it always is. I climbed in. I started the engine, and I drove home knowing that Caldwell's hardware would still be there in the morning, and the morning after that. And for as long as I have anything to say about it, I kept my promise, Patricia. I kept it.